Hi everybody, Gila Glassberg here, registered dietitian and intuitive eating counselor. I am on a mission to help you have a healthy relationship with food. I have over 150 podcast episodes. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts, and you could also watch most of those videos here on YouTube. If you want more of my content, you could follow me at Instagram at gila.glassberg.intuitiverd or go to my website, www.gilaglassberg.com. There's plenty of videos, podcasts, blog posts, even recipes now. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you could sign up directly from my website. You could also purchase many of my courses where I talk about intuitive eating, health at every size, body positivity, and many other therapeutic tools to help you have a very healthy relationship with food for yourself and for your family. Thanks for being here. Have a great day. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, your host, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor. And today I have on Ahuva Gottdiener. Did I say it right?
Gottdiener.
Gottdiener. Got it. Okay. Ahuva is the owner of Homegrown Kosher, and I follow you on Instagram, and I love watching your stuff. So if you could tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where do you live? What do you do?
So I live in Muncie, New York, and people are always surprised at that. People assume that I live like somewhere on a farm with acres and acres and acres. I have 3/4 of an acre, not a significantly larger, slightly maybe than some of the surrounding lots. Some people have pools, some people have, different fancy landscaping. Instead, I use my yard. I mean, we have some open part of my yard, but I use it for my chicken coop and sheds and my garden. It's just what we use it for. That's what's our priority. My passion is to teach people about where their food comes from and connect to that. I feel that there's such a level of disconnect in the world today. People they just feel like they're missing something because we're so disconnected to where not just where our food comes from, but where everything comes from. We used to be very involved in the production of everything that we used in our daily lives, and we're not. And by gardening or even just watching someone garden, in the case of people watching me, you can make that connection and become a more connected person and a more appreciative person, gain an appreciation for the world around you.
Totally. Okay, so you mentioned you have a chicken coop. That's really cool. So tell me a little bit more about your childhood. Like, did you always know that you wanted to have a farm? Is this your full-time job? Did you have another job? Like, walk me through that.
So I always knew that I wanted to be involved in growing things. I grew up gardening with my father. Even when we lived in Brooklyn when I was a young child, and even in our little tiny yard, we had planters galore. And I went with him to the nursery, or we started our own seeds at some point. We started doing that. And then when we moved to Muncie, we had a much larger, I was always helping with that. I have yet to find this issue. If anybody has old issues of National Geographic World magazine from the 90s, I don't remember exactly what year, there was a special Earth Day edition. It was like one of the first ones. And like they took art from the readers, and I drew a picture of our compost bin, and it got into the magazine. I was so proud.
Yeah.
I wish I still had that.
Yeah.
I've always been this way. I've always been passionate about these things and talking about these things all the time. And I started my Instagram account because I wanted to share it with the world. I didn't know how many people would be interested, but I felt there was a void in food Instagrammers. We're talking about cooking or we're talking about restaurants, but I also share my recipes and cooking. Also step back a little bit and share where the food comes from and talk about how it's grown. Even if not every single person is going to grow everything. I mean, I can't grow everything. I love avocados.
Right.
Grow in New York.
Right.
So I started sharing about 2016, and it grew slowly in the beginning. I still remember my 613th follower. That was like a significant number. Who it is. And I slowly grew sharing the things I wanted to share. At a certain point, I started sharing the sourdough that I was baking, and that grew off into a micro bakery that lasted quite a few years, lasted like, I think 5 years, that I was baking once a week to sell my bread. I started in my kitchen, and then it became a small bakery area that's in my basement. And I sold wholesale. At the height of it, I was selling 144 loaves a week, which takes a huge amount of time. If you know anything about sourdough, it was a 3-day process plus cleaning up on Friday. It was a job. It was a big job. Part of Tuesday, a few hours on Tuesday, the entire Wednesday, the entire Thursday, and part of Friday cleaning up. So
Mm.
I did that for a while. Then I started to slow down on that. It was just too much for me because I literally feel sick every Friday because it's very, people don't realize it. Think like, oh, baking. It's
Yeah.
baking that amount of bread is very physical work,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
wearing me down. I was just talking to someone the other day that I used to have hand pain all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have that anymore. That was, I knew that that was coming from overuse, basically.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
finger, I need to go to the doctor for and get injections and all these different things.
Right.
So it was too much for me. I know some people can do it. There are other people out there. I've spoken to other people who do it. It just, for me, it wasn't the thing. But at the same time, as I was slowing down on that, my Instagram account, which is what I originally started it for, to share the things that I'm passionate about. And I feel that it's important for people in the world to get this information and connect, make this connection. It started to grow a lot more. So I really worked on focusing on that, and I kept my hand in it. And I was once a month still baking. This was last January. I started to slow down, and by June, my Instagram account had exploded, and my Facebook and TikTok had started also to grow. And by August was my last month that I sold bread. And now I no longer sell bread. I no longer have the homegrown kosher bakery. That's what I called it. And I am full time doing content creation, recipe development, garden consultations. I also consult for people who are doing sourdough and micro bakeries. I do consultations for people who want to get backyard chickens. I just convinced myself out of another customer yesterday that this happens all the time. Somebody will call me, I'll talk to them, and I'll tell them, you're not ready for chickens. She was right.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do not get them unless you're committed to
Mm-hmm.
serve them for their natural lifetime. It could be 5, 6, even 10 years. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get them for the summer and give them back. I said, then go visit a farm. It's
Right.
not for you. So I do this all the time. I convince people out of getting animals because it's a big commitment. I think if that's all that I do, I'll accomplish something. A lot of people had this mindset of that animals are like something you could rent or something temporary. And I really don't think that's good for your children. That's not a good way to raise your children, that animals are disposable like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of farms, even right here in Muncie, there's West Maple Farms. You can go
Yeah.
visit. It's beautiful. It's a great place um, for kids and even adults who want to see animals. And then you don't have to take up because it is a big responsibility to take care of any animals. If somebody wants to get started with a connection, I wouldn't say start with chickens for eggs. I would say start with gardening, because if you forget to water a plant, it's a plant. It's sad.
Right.
Not
Right.
an animal who is
Right.
suffering.
Right. Right. Okay. Wow. That's like a very unique story because I don't really know many people who own chickens. I don't think I know anybody. Um, okay. And I actually will tell you that I did go to high school in Muncie. I went to Batora, so I know like the area a little bit. Um, but I want to go back a few steps. So you said you grew up with a father that was very into like gardening, and I guess the same way that you're passionate about knowing where your food comes from, he also had that. That's where he was
That's where
coming from.
that's where it comes from. We did a project together when I was a teenager where we grew a small patch of wheat. So we're talking like, I don't know if it was like 6 feet by 8 feet or something, not very large. And then we took the wheat, and we cut it, when it dried, we cut it, and then we separated off the kernels and we ground it. And then I made a tiny little roll like that.
Wow.
Project of it wasn't, the point wasn't that we couldn't buy flour in the store. The amount
Yeah.
of effort and time that we put into that what the point was to, now we really know
Right.
it's made and where it comes from. That was a really fun project.
Yeah, I would like literally like love that as a kid. I wish like I could go back in time, but I can't. But so where did your father get that? Like, do you know where he got that passion from? Like, where did it start?
I have no idea. He grew up as a kid in Borough Park, and he grew things in
Wow.
the backyard. When I met recently someone who he grew up with, and she said, yeah, he was growing things in the backyard in Borough Park when he was a kid. He tells a story, I think, of his father like growing carrots with him or something, one thing, and then like that was it. But I think just it's natural within him also to love to be connected to where things come from and growing things. So I come by it honestly, as they say.
Yeah. Also, I think that we as humans like do have that natural, I mean, it's a little buried under technology, but naturally I think we want to know like where does our stuff come from? Where does our food come from? Like we're a little bit like I don't know that many people who are into it. Like I happen to like I love that stuff. I'm a dietitian, and when I went to school, that was really my passion, like the real stuff, like food and nurturing people with food, and where does our food come from, and the nutrients, and how like naturally food has so many things that are good for you in it without like demonizing food. So I really like relate to that. Not that I grow anything or have chickens, but I think it's really like fascinating. But was this when you like got married, I guess, and bought your house, did you right away have chickens? Did you right away do the garden?
So gardening we did very, very early on. We started with some planters and a little fencing around it, and then grew to some raised beds, and then eventually we built a garden. This is all within the first 10 years of our marriage. We had a
Wow.
nice garden in our old house. I did not get chickens right away. About 10 years into our marriage, I finally got my chickens. And I say finally got my chickens is because I had wanted chickens since I was 12 years old. And my mother was like, nope, that's it. We have enough with the garden. I have enough with raising children. No chickens. She was not having it. She said, if you would still like them when you grow up, you can get chickens then. This is like one of my favorite stories to tell. And I did. And now I've had them for how many years now? Have I had them for 12, 13 years, something like that. So it was a little
Wow.
less than 10 years into our marriage when I first got the chickens. I got them for my, yeah, it was the 30th birthday. So yeah, it was 10 years into my marriage when I got them. So now it's coming up now on 13 years this summer. Yeah. I
Wow.
have
Wow.
chickens, and not the same chickens because they don't live
Okay.
that long.
Right.
But I had chickens for 13 years now, and I love them. I just, it's not just for the eggs. You think I'm getting,
Why chickens? Why do you love chickens?
I fell in love with a baby chick when I was 12 years old, and I still feel that feeling. And you think they're just baby chicks, but it's not. I find chickens just as a group of them, I find them hilarious to watch. If you sit and watch a flock of chickens, you can understand their interactions between themselves. They're just, when they run toward you, they look like little dinosaurs, which actually people call them little velociraptors or T-Rexes, because they're actually, of all living creatures today, the most related to the dinosaurs.
Interesting. I never heard that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, they, the way they like shred apart their treats, and they get so excited to see you. Because some people say, oh, so have a dog. It's not, it's something about their flock dynamic. It's not just like a single one of them, how they interact with each other. And they also lay eggs for you. So it's
Right.
the whole thing
Right.
combined.
How many chickens do you have?
Officially 5.
Okay. Got it. 5 chickens. And how many eggs do you get?
It really depends, because every chicken technically can lay 1 egg every like 25 to 26 hours. That's like their internal cycle.
Wow.
However, as a chicken gets older, it'll lay less often. As
Uh,
the daylight hours are shorter, it'll skip a lot more days because it can only lay during daylight. So that 26 hours say, comes out when it's dark, it'll wait till the next day to lay it. In the
wow.
fall, they tend to molt, so they lose feathers, and during that time, they stop laying temporarily while they use their energy to grow back new feathers. So, and all my chickens are
Fascinating.
not, so the youngest chickens can lay, I think, like 300 something eggs a year, but as of certain breeds, because certain breeds lay less. But as they get older, it's less and less. And my flock consists of chickens that are coming up on 2 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old, and then I have one 8 year old. Every other year. Yes, this year we are getting chicks. So,
Wow.
so it depends. Some days in the winter, I was getting like 1 or 2 eggs because it's dark, less daylight. Some of them were molting. In
Mm,
spring, I could be getting a lot more eggs, 1 per chicken sometimes. Even the oldest, I found, in my experience, even my oldest hens will lay a few eggs in the spring when the daylight hours are increasing the most, like Pesach time,
mhm.
which is a good time to get lots of
Yeah.
eggs.
Do you ever have to buy eggs, or do you always have like tons and tons of
So
eggs?
2 years ago in the winter, I bought a few dozen eggs, but really that was my own fault because I was testing a recipe for a creme brulee tart, and I went through multiple dozens of eggs, much more
Uh,
than I really do in the winter.
got it.
At
Got
that
it.
point, I had to buy like 2 or 3 dozen eggs. Normally, no. Normally, we have extra eggs, and we share with my parents, and my married daughter now also takes some eggs.
Oh wow, that's so nice. That's so much fun. Do you have like all these different types of like recipes that you use because you have all those eggs, or no?
No, but just cook like I regularly do, and that we use those are the eggs that we use.
Got it. Okay, that's fascinating. So in 2016, when you started your Instagram, it was purely like hobby, or there was some motivation to make it into a business?
So it was purely hobby. I did not have in mind for it to be a business. I felt that this was a void in the space of social media, of sharing this type of thing, and that I wanted other frum women to see someone who looked like them and who grew things and did all these things. I made a point, like if I'm building something with tools, to show that it makes certain people feel seen, because plenty of other women do it, and it makes other people realize that we're not a monolith. And that was also the other thing I wanted to do at a certain point, when people were coming out and like showing, like, or you think we're oppressed, we're not. We can do all kinds of things.
Right.
That made me motivated even more to share and show everyone's different. Yeah. This is what I like to do. This is what I do. And it was purely hobby. I didn't even think of this aspect. And then the bakery became a business, but I didn't even think of this aspect becoming a business so much until later on, when I had grown to a certain point that it was taking up so much of my time. Right. That I needed to monetize it somehow. Certain things like the garden consultations I had been doing for free, giving people free gardening advice for a long time, like first friends, etc. And I realized this is something that maybe I can monetize. I'm spending tens of hours some people's gardens. Like I spend 15, 20 hours sometimes, depending on how complicated it is, especially in the beginning. Before now, I have a little bit more of a system. So I have like everything I sent everyone written up. So I just have to copy and paste, like depending on what you're growing. So it's a little simpler now, but I could spend a long time sometimes on these things. So I realized maybe I can make some money to help pay my bills. Right. All the time that it's taking.
Yeah. And the bakery, like, so sourdough is like a whole, I did do a little bit of sourdough. I definitely asked you questions when I was doing it, like when everyone got into it during COVID, but you were into it before COVID, right?
I have been baking sourdough for, have trouble with the math, 20 years. Now I know, because it was a year before my second daughter was born.
Wow.
So it was a long time ago, before it was super popular. I have always been interested in, like I said, where things come from, how things work, always. So I knew that this powder, this yeast that we buy, or even the ones in the refrigerator, couldn't have always had that. How is bread made? Right. So I looked into it myself, and it wasn't, information about sourdough was not readily available, but I found a chapter in a different book that had some instructions for making sourdough, in a different baking book called The Bread Baker's Apprentice. It's a very popular baking book at the time. And then one little chapter, like a tiny chapter on sourdough. And I taught myself from that chapter. There wasn't the resources that there are today.
No YouTube videos.
No YouTube videos.
No YouTube.
At a certain point, I actually emailed the author of the book to ask a question. Eventually, I got a loaf of bread, and I was like very proud of myself, because I use commercial yeast. There's flour, water, and salt in here. And then eventually, I got a really, really good loaf of bread. I was like, wow, this is the best bread I've ever tasted. So I kept baking it, maybe not every week, on and off, but I kept baking it because it was so delicious. And when I started my Instagram, that was just one of the things that I shared, my sourdough. And I didn't think anybody would even know what it was, because it had become a trend, and I missed it until people were like, wow, do you sell that? I'm like, what, this weird bread that I've been making forever?
Yeah.
And that's how it grew at that point.
Wow, just organically. It's just people wanted your bread, and it's a big process. When you originally were making sourdough, were you using the Dutch oven, or were you not?
So the Dutch oven method, I think it was either 2003 or 4 or 5, something around that time, that it was, I think, no, not 2003 is when I started baking. I think it was 4 or 5. I have to look it up. I don't have it right in front of me. When there was an article in the New York Times by Mark Bittman, who popularized that method of baking with a Dutch oven. I was already baking sourdough. I never saw that article. I didn't know anything about it. So I was baking I started with tiles in my oven, terracotta tiles, and then I upgraded to a baking stone. Getting steam in is complicated if you're not using a Dutch oven that covers it, which the Dutch oven is not like the way to make authentic sourdough. I'll get to that in a second.
I really want to hear about that.
The Dutch oven is a hack for duplicating a stone deck oven, which is the traditional way of making a crusty bread. Sourdough isn't only that. Sourdough is a way of leavening. You can make pizza, you can make challah, you can make any type of leavened bread you can imagine, you can make with sourdough. But people like this crusty bread, this artisan sourdough, and the best way to bake that is in a stone deck oven. Most people don't have stone deck ovens. So someone came up with the idea of baking in a covered pot to duplicate the stone all around, and it keeps the steam in, which gives that nice crust. Mm-hmm. before that, there were other ideas before someone came up with that idea. And one of the ideas was to put a stone down, and then I would put a pan underneath that I would pour water in. Some people these days use pans, and they use that method with lava rocks in it. Nobody had come up with that yet. And then I would also take a spray bottle and spray, and then close the oven and spray, open and spray like 3 or 4 times the first minutes. It was a big job. I got good bread, but it's a huge job, and I broke more than one oven doing that. You're not supposed to spray steam into your gas ovens.
Got it. And the stretch and fold, is it real? Do we really have to do it that many times?
The only thing that I can understand of why they came up with that stretch and fold method is because people are afraid of kneading. Everybody who makes challah is not afraid of kneading. So I don't know why. Also because a lot of times for this type of dough that you want, it's a very sticky dough, which can be harder to knead. Now, the best way to handle a sticky dough is to wet your hands. People would like put flour. So that makes it not that texture that people are looking for. So the way to make it simplified for people who are starting to say, don't knead it, just stretch and fold it a bunch of times. In my experience, you get a better quality dough if you knead it.
Okay.
Sticky dough. The stretch and fold. So I do some stretch and fold even when I need it in a mixer, actually, and commercially, but I do like 3 sets, maybe 2 to 3 sets. That's it. Just when my dough is all kneaded and my gluten is already formed, to give the dough structure. That helps. It's a method. What I do. Some people punch down their challah. I don't. And halfway through the knead, I do like a folding method to give the dough a nice structure. But it's not like I see people who stay up all night because every hour they need to stretch and fold dough, and they're so married to. There are different ways you can do things. You can throw it in the mixer to develop your gluten. When you've got your gluten, you don't want to overdevelop gluten if you want that style of, bread, but you want to develop the gluten somewhat. That's part of what stretch and fold does. And the other thing it does is give you dough structure, and you can just do that. And then every 15 minutes, you can do 3 towards the end, once the gluten structure is formed, you can wait 15 minutes, do another one, wait 15 minutes, do another one, and then you're done. It's not like
that's still a lot. That's still a lot of stretching and folding, I think.
So I find that it really isn't, because I mix my dough in a mixer. Then I do one once I get it out of the mixer. Then I clean up. Then I do one more, and then I'm just finishing up puttering on, do one more, and then I just leave it. This is what I do. I started to do again now, and then I just leave it to rise. When it goes into where I want it, then I shape it. It's a lot of hands-off time sourdough, but when you institute a rigid stretch and fold structure that you must do it over 5 hours, 5 times exactly, you can't go anywhere.
Right. Right. Because I'm thinking I make challah, I've been making challah for a long time. And I use my hands, and I knead it, and then I leave it for hours until I'm ready to braid it. And then I punch it down again, and then I braid it, and then I leave it to rise. And I'm not an expert baker at all. It happens to be because I'm a dietitian, we had to take some cooking, baking classes, the science of baking. So I think about this often when I'm making muffins, not to overmix, because then you will have too much gluten, right? You will.
Right. You don't want to overdevelop the gluten. You get a tough muffin. You want a soft crumb in a muffin.
Right. And did you ever see that YouTube clip of, I think it's Jimmy Kimmel walking around and asking people do you eat gluten? And they're like, oh, for sure not. And he's like, what is gluten? And they have no idea what it is.
No, it is. It's just a protein. Right. It's not.
People think it's terrible. It's going to kill you. Gluten. Oh my gosh, it's horrible. It's no, it's not horrible. Why are you saying that?
Gluten is horrible for people with celiac. The same way dairy is horrible for me because I'm allergic to it. Right. So they have an allergy to gluten, but everyone, just most people can eat dairy, most people can't eat gluten. And the demonization of it, especially when people say, oh, I can't eat gluten, but I can eat spelt.
Right.
Secret. Spelt is a type of wheat. You've heard me say this many times. I have a whole article about it on my blog, because when people start to talk to me about spelt, I'm just go read the blog article.
Right.
Spelt is literally just a variant of wheat. There are many. There's durum that pasta is made out of.
Right.
Spelt, a lot of times spelt is used to make what they call farro. That's a lot of times spelt because just the type of kernel of wheat it is. And it's not necessarily the best flour to make bread because of the type of gluten exactly that it has. You can make bread with it. It doesn't always react well with sourdough acid, but it's not really any different than if you can't eat any other type of wheat, but you say spelt is only okay, then placebo effect.
Yeah.
Most of the people who, in my experience, who are really hyping up like spelt, spelt, spelt are trying to sell you something. This is one of
Yes.
the things I always tell people, like when it comes to any health claims,
Yeah.
be very wary of people who are trying to sell you something, whether it's a product or a service or a course or whatever it is. Be very wary, because if they're trying to sell you something, then they have an agenda.
Right. So, this is actually a good segue. Like, tell me about like your relationship with food. Like, have you always had this like positive relationship with food? How do you feel about like diet culture? Like people like saying like gluten's gonna kill you. Like what's like your perspective on it?
So like I was saying before we started recording, I've been around the block. I've seen fat demonized, and you should only eat a low fat diet, high in grains and vegetables. And then I saw Atkins, where you should only eat meat and don't eat fruit ever. Fruit is evil. And I've just like watched the cycle now. Low carbs
No
are
bread. Bread is horrible. Bread's
bread is
unhealthy.
horrible. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Potatoes are horrible. Oh, potatoes are really good for you. Like
Yeah.
it's like
Eggs.
it's whiplash. Yeah, eggs
Yeah.
terrible. Eggs
Yeah.
great. Butter terrible. Only have margarine. Margarine terrible.
Yeah.
Really like whiplash, where you're like back
Yeah.
and forth, like you
Yeah.
don't know what to believe already. And people like, food is food. I don't like value judgments on food is like bad food, good food. Food is food. We need it to nourish our bodies. I have one kid who got a prescription from the doctor at one point to eat ice cream and potato chips every single day, because he was not getting enough calories to grow. He was
Mm-hmm.
even 8 years old, but he hadn't grown for a year, which is a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
So he needed more calories. He needed to eat high calorie foods. This is the kid who would much rather eat celery and cucumbers.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to yeshiva now. He's a teenager. Baruch Hashem, he grew. He gets enough calories. He still takes a giant bag of carrot sticks with him every day to yeshiva because he likes it.
Right.
And that's great. When my kids were little, I actually used to have to hide the vegetable. I used to cut vegetables out for the Shabbos meal and hide them until the kids each have just a little chicken, because you do need to have some protein. So eat your chicken, and then I'll put the vegetables back.
Wow.
But just trying to get a balanced diet into children without like bad food, good food is
Yeah.
hard. More like
Yeah.
you have to have some protein because it's important for your growth. You have as many vegetables as you want. So that's the thing I always tell people. The only things that are actually proven time and time again, and not the whiplash back and forth of this diet, that diet, is that eating lots of vegetables and moving your body are good for you. Not don't eat other things. Add vegetables to your body as much as possible, which is why I think gardening is great, because you get to grow some yourself and be connected to that, and move whatever type of movement you enjoy. There isn't one. I've also seen one type of exercise is bad, like walking, terrible exercise. Workout, whatever. I've tried different exercise over the years. Walking in nature is my favorite exercise. So I try to get them, because it's good for my mind, not just for my body. It's good for my soul. Yeah. But my husband loves cycling. He takes 50-mile bike rides all the time, 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles all the time. He is traditionally thin. But he just actually went to the doctor recently, and I'm giving all his medical information. And he's in his mid-40s, and everything looked great. All his blood work looked great. Everything is perfect. To look at him, you would say, oh, he's unhealthy, but he's probably one of the healthiest people in his age group, because he eats lots of vegetables. He also eats vegetables. He used to like go places like, and colleagues he'd be eating his carrot sticks, like, oh, you're eating rabbit food, but delicious.
Yeah.
Oh, like, this is a food you have to eat because you have to be good. Then you don't enjoy the food. It could really be good, the vegetables, but you have this like thing programmed into you that you're eating a salad and you're like miserably eating a salad. Everyone else says, why don't you have a salad and pasta? If you like salad, you don't like salad, have roasted vegetables. Have soup. There's so many different ways. So because I've watched that happen myself, and I remember watching when I was a teenager, watching my seminary roommates, who I came in and I wasn't super thin. And I was the largest person in the room, and I had 3 roommates, and they were all like thinner and thinnest. And them complain about their bodies. I have no shape. I look like a boy. I like complain. I'm like, that's when the light bulb turned on for me at that age. Like, it started to realize, like, wait, they're not even happy, and they're like the ideal.
Yeah.
Like, is there an ideal?
Right. Wow. You're so perceptive, because a lot of people go through that and they don't think that,
I'm not saying that like that's when I suddenly realized everything and realized that diet culture is garbage. That's when I started to realize that like something's like funny here. This is not, if the people who have the body shape that I would think is ideal aren't even happy, then maybe it's about us being happy in our own skin, and not really about like like some ideal that if you get to, you're also not going to be happy.
Right. That's so true. I mean, I see that all the time. Which is like fascinating for me to see, like, and to
I
share that,
also
like,
watch people who've been dieting for decades, and I
right.
watch them lose weight and then gain back even more and lose weight. And sometimes
Mm,
I feel like if maybe if they hadn't, this has been proven by science recently, maybe if they hadn't done that severe diet, they would just be the same as they were before they started
right.
all this, which is maybe that's their body shape where they're supposed
Right.
to be body size. And
Right.
they'd also be so much happier. And they had
Yeah.
so much money and time and
Yeah.
energy, like into these fad diets that really like trying to force themselves into a box. Somebody once said to me something that I highly disagree with, like nothing tastes as good as being
Skinny
thin. I
feels. Yeah.
was like, no, that's not
Yeah.
true.
Right.
And not everyone is supposed to have a super, that's a different body. Just like we
Right.
recognize people are taller or shorter, a different color eyes, and different shoe sizes. I mean, maybe in some places, actually, in traditional Chinese culture, they try
Right.
to get women to have smaller feet. We think that's crazy, right? Buying
We
their
do the same thing.
smaller
Yeah.
feet. But we do the same thing, trying to force people's bodies. And some of the things that we're doing to people make them unhealthier in the long term and cause all kinds of issues. I mean, I'm not the dietitian, but just from what I've seen people develop issues and eating disorders and other even physical issues from this constant restriction
Binging and
and then the emotional stress that it causes people like can I go someplace, am I going to have food that's on my diet to eat, okay, maybe I just won't eat anything, and then they
right.
headaches because they're not eating properly. It's like,
Yeah. I know. It's really upsetting, but it's also really interesting for me to hear that you came to this place like you just kind of like observe like human like what's going on around you,
and
people
just throw
dieting.
former classmate of mine from high school actually told me about intuitive eating and about the book, and I bought it, and I'm nodding along a few years ago only, and I'm nodding it along like, oh yeah, okay, I realized all this on my
Yeah.
own. I
Yeah.
realized this, but through going through different, like, myself observing people and myself also when I was much younger, trying, like I would try with like really, really restrict. And I know what I can restrict to be a smaller person than I am. I was never super thin because I don't think there's physically a way that I could be
Hmm.
super thin. This is my body type, but I was quite a bit thinner when I restricted and gained even more weight when I stopped
Right.
severely. But I also had constant migraines
Right.
every single day
Because you were
because
hungry.
I wasn't getting enough nutrition. And
Right.
I was not a happy person. And
Right.
now I worry more about, like I said, about what I'm eating, like adding things, eating
Right.
lots of vegetables, and movement is so important. And as I get older, I find that movement, forget about like long-term health. If I go a few days without moving, I feel it. The aches and
Yeah.
pains in my
Yeah.
body. The
Yeah.
aches and pains
Totally.
are not a sign I need to rest more. They're the sign I need to get out and take a walk. Like
Right. Totally.
I had pneumonia recently, and I was sick, and I literally couldn't walk. But I was resting all the times. You would think I was getting all these pains and aches in my body, and I couldn't walk because I had a high fever. But as soon as I was able to get outside, even just take a walk for 3 minutes outside in front of my house, I started to just feel better.
Yeah.
That's
Totally.
trying to move, not to sit all day.
Right. It's very like it's diet culture is very black and white. So like if you don't, if you don't sweat, if you don't do it for an hour, if you don't, it's not high intensity. And like it's all about balance. Like, yeah, add your fruits and vegetables, but not too much because then you'll feel bloated, or don't cut your carbs just because like I know obviously we both agree, but so many people don't it's so hard for them to believe because we're so entrenched in like skinny's the best, and of course you have to be on a diet. But did you ever struggle with body image? Like, was that ever something that was like really hard for you?
So I think, like, I don't know if I would identify it as such, but at that moment when I was 18, sitting in a room of people, that's when I suddenly realized it, because I had always myself I wished I was a thinner person. I wasn't necessarily strong with body image to the extent that I even recognized that that's what it was, but it was like any other like teenager who's like,
Right,
oh, like thin must be right, and I'm not thin,
right,
so I just assume I'm not pretty, I'm not thin, I'm just,
right.
that's what I assumed. And then I realized that all these people who had perfect bodies, whatever that means, there's no such thing, also weren't happy. And that's the moment that I realized that I just like, it's all about accepting myself where I am and not trying for something else. It was a real moment because I was literally 4 girls in a room. There was me, who was like a size 14, I think. And then their size like 12, 14. And then there was the size 0 and 2, and maybe
Right.
one of them was a 4. Maybe. I don't even think so. I think it was like one size 0 and 2 size 2s. And
Yeah.
like I was like in this space and watching it, like living with people who
Hmm.
were so miserable because they were teenagers and 18-year-olds, all
Yeah.
are not happy with themselves. And that's when I realized that being happy with yourself has absolutely nothing to do with the size you are.
So I was gonna say 18-year-olds or 30-year-olds, like everybody, like I tell this to teenagers that I teach, or like when I do live workshops, I'm like, you know how like you're jealous of your friend because she's skinnier than you or she has like fancier vacations? Like, guess what, guys? It doesn't really change when you're 30, like unless you work on it, like unless you really have a clear understanding of your value system. Like, of course it's important to be healthy and I value health as a dietitian, but like you know what orthorexia is, like the eating disorder that like you're so obsessed with only eating quote unquote healthy food that you're so mentally unwell. So of course that's not healthy, right? So health is way more than like just what you eat and just how you move, right? There's mental health and there's sleep hygiene and there's like making sure that you're not restricting, right? Like all those things are, contribute to our overall health. So it's like it's really cool though that you came to it like so on your own.
I got, like I said, I've been around the block a few times and I've seen even some things myself, talking about orthorexia, some things myself I only realized maybe in the past 2 decades, even less, maybe the past decade. I've just actually had a conversation right before we got on. I was a WhatsApp conversation. And the last thing I told them before I came on with you is organic produce is a scam. And
Say it louder.
they were like, they thought I was joking, I think.
Yeah.
Has like this perception of me. Organic produce is a scam because organic produce is also sprayed with just as many poisons as
I, I,
conventional produce.
okay.
They're different poisons that are more expensive and have to be applied more heavily because they don't work as well and can be possibly more toxic even to the people who are applying them because of that. The biggest issue with any pesticides is to the people who are applying them. They have to literally wear hazmat suits to do it. And organic poison is just as organic as as a poison that's created in a lab. There are plenty of things in nature that are super poisonous that are organic.
It's like chemicals. Like, of course it's not good for you. It's chemicals. Water
What
is
are
chemicals.
chemicals?
They're all, I know.
One of the podcasts I watch says your body is a sack of chemicals, and I love that because it's true.
Yeah.
Literally, if they like made a graphic for their Instagram, like with all the chemicals that are in your body, and they all sound really scary, and a lot of those are
Yeah.
the chemicals that people demonize when they're in food, and they're
Yeah.
in like amino acids have names.
Yeah.
If you can't pronounce it, doesn't mean you can't eat it. Like if
Right.
somebody else, they also wrote like what's in an apple, like all the chemicals in an apple, and they sound really scary. But apples don't have
Yeah.
ingredient labels, and
Right.
people see ingredient labels, and if they're not scientists, they don't understand what they're reading. They
I
think it's
know.
bad. So organic produce is literally a scam. There's nothing, and the dirty dozen is also like drives me crazy because those, first of all, the dose makes the poison. So if there's trace amounts of anything, you go outside and you walk down a road next to cars, you're getting in way more produce than way more poisons than in your entire year of eating produce. Just
Right.
car exhaust. There's
Right.
trace amounts. Your body is designed to handle trace amounts of things
And
that
trans fats, trace amounts of trans fats, because there is trace amounts of trans fats in food naturally occurring.
exactly. Your body has a liver and kidneys that are designed to detox your body from things that it takes in just by breathing and eating. Even hey, apple seeds can be poisonous,
Right.
right? Are poisonous if you eat too many of them, right? That is it cyanide, I think, is in apricot pits also, like, and the trace amount ends up in the fruit, but your body can handle it. And
Right.
the poisons that are sprayed on so the bugs don't eat up our produce, by the time they get to you, there's like tiny little bit left. You rinse off your produce, it's even a more minuscule level left, and your organic produce has just as much poison, just different poisons. And when they do these things like Dirty Dozen, they don't tell you that about the poisons they don't measure the organic poisons that are just as poison to your body just because they're certified organic. So that's like one of the, but when going back to like gardening, I don't encourage people to spray anything, even organic, in their garden. And I rather encourage them to grow things that don't track bugs as much, or do things like hand picking bugs as much as possible, and really really discourage it. Like you need to spray with insecticidal soap or something like that because people are not equipped to put themselves in a hazmat suit to
Right.
go. And that's, like I said, where the biggest danger of exposure is to the people applying it. You're not equipped to like cover yourself and then take a shower right when you
Right.
come in, like leave the
Right.
hazmat suit
Right.
outside.
Right.
Just don't.
Right. Right. And
But
how upset are you about about GMOs, about people demonizing GMOs? How do you feel about that?
stupidest thing. People just don't understand. They don't understand what it is, the fear and not understanding. And I myself, when they first started talking about GMOs, it's 15 years ago, a little more, I didn't understand what it was. So instead of like, this is bad, I looked into it more and more. The more I looked into it, more I was like, this is great.
Right.
Like certain things, certain modern agricultural techniques of all kinds, not when I have GMOs,
Right.
pesticides, different things, saved humanity from
I was just
starvation.
going to say that. How do you think we have all this food from
The reason we
GMOs?
have all these people in the world now, and the reason we have all this food, and there actually aren't very many foods out there. When I see like these strawberries are non-GMO, I laugh. There are no GMO strawberries. This wheat is non-GMO. There's no GMO
I
wheat.
know, it's
For
really
growing. Like
crazy.
it's just like it's like I always tell people when they say like, "Oh, should I get GMO free wheat?" I was like, "Should you get gluten free water?"
Right.
Like it's the same thing. It's people don't understand. But besides for that, to explain what GMOs, people are just afraid of science because they don't
Right.
understand it. And
Right.
I try to do some education. It's very hard because
People don't believe you, right? They will, you said
they
when you
don't
said
get it.
organic.
Like, yeah, they don't understand what I'm saying because they don't understand. If they would ever really sit down and study it a little bit, I think people would, but I think people just don't have the either science education or interest in learning. And they'd much rather just read fear-based articles are like they clickbait, that's what they call it these days, that like really draw you in without truly understanding what's happening. Everything I once saw where they were asking people like, do you eat things with genes? Oh no, I don't think with genes. Like everything has genes, everything does.
Right.
That's so it's I could we could have like a 3 hour conversation
Yeah,
about.
but I'm thinking like even what's really hard for me to understand even is like people who I don't want to say I know, people who are like doctors, very wise people who do know how to read research, like they still do believe in dieting. They still prescribe dieting even though it never works. They still I hear people talk about, so many people talk about like how bad non-organic is. I know how somebody once, I was getting a manicure and she's like, oh, nectarines, I never eat stone fruit, you don't even know how bad, blah blah blah. I'm like,
Oh, maybe she's afraid of the cyanide in the pits.
right. No, she I think she was talking about like the pesticides. I don't really remember, but I was like, I never learned, I was a student. I was like, I never learned that. We don't talk about that in school. Like, you know, um, I actually had my students this year do this research project that I had to do in college, which I just like absolutely loved. I'm not sure if they loved it, but I gave them like a controversial topic in nutrition or just something that they were interested in, keto diet, intermittent fasting. And they had to find, first of all, I taught them about research methods, right? So like how big is your sample and how long have they studied these people, and what are the confounding variables, which is also super interesting, I think. I'm a little bit of a nerd. And finding peer-reviewed articles to support, well, to just learn about it really, actually, and to support their case if it's good or bad or whatever. And like, one of the topics was like eating late at night, right? And I was just like sitting there. I'm not sure if they really understood the magnitude of what they were saying, but they were like, yeah, non-conclusive. Yeah, it's only if you binge. Yeah, it's only if you're, can't sleep well. And I'm like, but nobody believes me, like it's still really hard for people to believe.
Not sleeping well is a huge contributor to bad health. So they're right away. That whole study is like
I know, I know.
it's a problem. People say there's a study, and they're like, okay, show me the study. Okay, there were
Right,
5 people studied.
right.
And I'm
For
like,
two
oh,
months.
exactly. It's like seriously, like that's what I was saying about the studies, the only consistent studies, time and time and time again, that prove anything in this realm for sure, conclusively, over and over and over again. Where eat lots of vegetables and move your bodies and sleep. Sleep
Right,
also. Sleep is
right.
really important.
Right. Or like what I say, like my simple nutrition guidelines, which I just try to help people implement in a non-restrictive or way, like adequate protein, adequate carbs, adequate fat, moderation, different types of fruits and vegetables, like whole grains are great for you, but you could get your fiber in other ways. Like, but it's so like we're like, I could talk to you about this for hours because we were like on the same page, but like it's so countercultural, the things that we're saying, even though it's like, I don't know, so obvious to us. Like it seems so obvious. Like, come on.
They fear-mongering articles and TikToks and YouTube and all the things, and even people who aren't on, like people talk among themselves, and
Yeah.
like there are people in the community who don't have any internet and they talk among themselves. They
Yeah.
talk, this person who sells this special flour
Yeah.
says this is the best thing that you could buy, and you have to import it from Canada. You have to go in. Somebody once tried to convince me to go in with them on an order of einkorn Canada flour from Canada. I'm like, okay, it's a type of wheat. It's, fine. I see no reason to spend like 10 times the amount that I'm spending on this flour, regular
Right.
flour, to get that. But like, oh, that person says that it's going to cure everything.
Right. I know. It's really sad, especially as a dietitian, that like people could call themselves nutritionists and they don't have any training. So like whatever, that's another whole discussion.
Health
But like,
coaches, that's a big pet peeve
yeah,
of mine.
yeah. I mean, listen, I don't, some health coaches are really great. I'm not talking badly about them. And some
But
dietitians don't know what they're talking about,
right,
Totally.
but you don't. But a health coach just could anybody. Tomorrow I could wake up and call myself a health coach.
Right.
So
Totally.
there's no proof of anything. And you're right. There are dietitians who also don't necessarily like like you said about doctors. A lot of times they're like, because this is something that really bothers me, because a lot of times people are larger because of underlying health issues. They can be larger than even their body should be. Let's say they have insulin resistant or whatever different
Right.
things.
Right. Right.
And that causes them to be larger. So they say, oh, if you're larger, you're going to have health problems.
Right.
Or
Okay.
maybe the health problems are causing them to be larger,
Yeah.
on the larger end, like cause
Right.
effect here.
It's the same thing as like,
Shark attacks. Have you seen that graphic?
no.
Let me tell you. So if you eat ice cream, you're much more likely to get attacked by a shark, because in the summer when ice cream eating goes up,
Right. Yes.
attacks. So
Right.
therefore, ice cream causes shark attacks, and
It's
everyone
correlation. It's
that,
correlation and causation. Right.
exactly. Everyone recognizes that that's ridiculous. And
Right.
that's a lot of what we're seeing.
Right. Right. I mean, it's the thing I always use as an example is that like African Americans are more salt sensitive. Like they do have higher incidences of hypertension, but like I don't usually tell people not to be African American, like I never do. I'm saying like that's correlation and causation, right?
That's
Like
knowing your
correlation.
own body. The same as I
Right.
don't eat dairy because I'm allergic to it.
Right. Right.
You have
Right.
to
And
know what you're more sensitive to, your own and different people. And for some people, my daughter has POTS. She needs lots of salt. And she was prescribed she carries salt packets around with her.
Right. Right.
So
Right, exactly. I have this intuitive eating group that I'm in, and something came up. Somebody was talking about sugar, and there is an a dietitian who like works with cancer patients, and I was like, we were talking about inflammation, sugar, and I'm like, but why do people demonize sugar so much? Why? Like, what am I missing? And it's like sugar is sugar. Like it's okay to have sugar, like maybe you don't want to drink Coke all day because then you're not going to get other nutrients that you need, but sometimes you need a can of Coke because you need like 110 calories to get you through the next hour.
and too much sugar would probably give you a tummy ache. But eating too many
Too many
cucumbers
carrots, yeah.
probably okay. We're also probably
Yeah.
give you a tummy ache.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I know it's really like nice to have somebody to talk to about this that really gets it. Also, like, is this something that you feel like with your Instagram page, you have people are like coming around to like this specific um conversation about like how like not to demonize GMOs or pesticide, like all that type of stuff, or do you still feel like that's people are not ready to really accept that?
I talk about it. Sometimes people always get surprised and angry at me when I talk about it, but I don't think people are ready yet. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
hope at some point people will be ready to hear this, but I don't think that people are really ready for all their, like, people have very strong. I was just talking about something else that people have that's nothing to do with this, that people have very strong preconceived notions about it. And I got people very, very, very upset. People get
Mm-hmm.
very like, but I'd much rather slowly over time
Mm-hmm.
introduce the ideas without like just coming out and screaming it all day and not because not
Right. Exactly. Exactly. You can't do that. Yeah.
minds. Um, there's education that's important. There's also education in the medical community that's important. It's people learning to recognize the difference between trained professionals and somebody who woke up one day and hung out a shingle calling themselves a health coach.
Yeah.
And also people need to more buyer beware. People need to be much more suspicious of people who are trying to sell them something.
Right.
When
Totally.
I'm telling people there's nothing wrong with organic. I'm not trying to sell you my
Right.
pesticide. I'm not trying to sell you
Right.
my produce. I'm
Right.
garbage. And I'm telling you, maybe don't spray these things yourself because you're not equipped to use proper safety procedures. But I'm not trying to, but there are people who are trying to sell you, whether it's their mixes or their bars or their health coaching or their course or whatever it is. And always be suspicious when someone is trying to sell you something that's related to what they're talking about.
Right. It's interesting because like I was thinking about this in terms of like diet culture. This is what I was gonna say, that like it's a business, right? Like weight loss sells. Like when I was starting with intuitive, like I'm a dietitian, and then when I was switching over more to like the intuitive eating space, people told me like you have to sell weight loss also. And I'm like, but I don't believe in it. It's like I'm not gonna do something I don't believe in. And they're like, but weight loss sells. Like even if you just call yourself like a weight loss, I'm like, I'm not gonna do that, you know? And it's true, you're right. Like the fear mongering or the drama or the like, I guess the confidence, like when people like, you know, like when people are like, this is going to cure you, this
What's
is going to make you
interesting
feel
is
this.
it's in the health field that people are less health field, you're less likely to be suspicious. Like when I, for example, I work for an appliance company, I say, I bought my appliance from there. I think they're great. People understand that I obviously I'm not objective completely. I have
Right.
great experience. I recommend them. I had great experience with their installers who had no idea who I was.
Hmm.
Also, and but I'm this is the information. This is my, why don't you, that's my recommendation as a friend. You can ask somebody else. But when it comes to people, like all of a sudden they're the expert and we're not suspicious at all about anything. But other things people have learned to be like, if someone's trying to sell you a used car,
Yeah.
that they're a used car salesman.
Yeah.
But somehow when it comes to this, people are just like so afraid and so much misinformation out there. I have some great accounts that I follow that have like unbiased SciPod. Do you follow them?
No.
Should follow Unbiased SciPod. Some great information, and I definitely recommend people follow them about this topic and talking about the fear mongering. And like, this is real science. This is
Hmm.
like there's a lot of nuance also in things evolving and changing, and as our knowledge evolves and change. But like, there's no like hard and fast. This is the only
Yeah.
way.
Right.
I've seen people say, like I said, the whiplash of this is the only way, and then this is the only way 2 years later, and then this is a different only way
Yeah.
2 years after
Right.
that.
Right.
So
Always be wary of like, this is the only way, because there's no one right way to live and to eat.
everyone's different. That's I think that medicine is slowly starting to recognize that, at least when it comes to different treatments for diseases, that different people's bodies are different, and I hope that filters down also to people's understanding of diet and health, that everyone's bodies are different. Because if everyone reacts to cancer differently and different cancers in different people's bodies and different based on genetics need different treatments, then wouldn't it make sense that maybe not all of us are the same? People recognize it when it comes to allergies. Like when I say I
Right.
don't eat dairy, I don't mean dairy's bad. I mean it's bad for me personally. And maybe
Right.
you're a celiac, so you can't eat gluten, but it's not bad for everyone. People need, I think, I'm hoping that people will recognize that, and then people need to learn their own bodies, which intuitive eating, that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yes, I'm gonna wrap up, but no pun intended. Like this, hopefully this episode will just plant some seeds in people's brains. And I would love to, I'm just thinking as we're talking, like maybe we could do an Instagram live or just talk about this, because it's like actually like I wish that I could scream it from the rooftops that like GMOs are not bad and pesticides aren't bad. But
That's why I said follow on Unbiased SciPod, and also Food Science Babe, not Food Babe,
yes,
not her, Food
yes, yes,
Science.
yes. I know her. Yeah.
So also those are two accounts that really give really good information to counter a lot of the fear mongering that's out there.
Yeah, I love watching those videos where like the guy is like in the grocery store and he's like, "This will kill you, MSG," and then she's like she really quotes all the research, right? Like that one. Yeah, I know.
Tomatoes and mushrooms are delicious because of MSG.
Right. I know. I what's the name of that book that I just read about fear mongering? It was specifically a lot about MSG. I can't remember what it's called, but if I remember it, I'll put it in the show notes. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us. I loved having you on, and I could talk to you for hours.
Great being
And
on.
I hope that this will really educate people and at least whet their appetite to learn more and to do some research.
Right. I hope people will have open minds to maybe and learn to be a little suspicious of people selling you things, please.
Yes, agreed. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.